Hello there, this is James S. Croft, 1978, and as most of you probably know by now, I am a massive, die-hard fan of many of the movies written and directed by Ki-Duk. To understand why, if you haven't already done so, then please watch my previous videos, links down as Honourable. But either way, in this video, I will be listing my personal top 10 of the most powerful films written and or directed by him that I have seen to date. The movies which, even if they left me feeling physically disgusted, have had a profound emotional impact upon me, challenging my assumptions and my beliefs, as well as, more importantly, those of society as a whole, influencing how I perceive the world even now, several years after I originally saw them. Before I continue though, it's important for me to make 3 points abundantly clear. First of all, that as I just mentioned, these are my own subjective opinions based upon how each film affected me personally. That although I plan to make a series of videos in the near future exploring and explaining how and why what I love about a given movie might be the reason why other people hate it, in the meantime, if you don't agree with my opinion or interpretation of a given film, then please feel free to make your own videos. Secondly, that although I've done everything possible to watch all of the movies attributed to Ki-Duk, even if it was only as an uncredited writer, I still have yet to see Wild Animals or Stop for the simple reason that I can't find them anywhere, either with or without English subtitles. So if you have any idea where I can find and view them, even if it means learning Korean, then do please get in touch. And finally, perhaps most importantly of all, that these films are definitely not for everyone, because as I explained further in the videos, links down as your underbar, they expose the darkest, most disturbing and most brutal aspects of humanity. With the exception of some of the movies which were written but not directed by him, Ki-Duk's filmography is an exploration of everything which falls under the general umbrella of love, including sexuality, family and relationships, longing and desire, but also including jealousy, envy, malevolent obsession, manipulation and exploitation, and the need to possess and to control. Remember, if love, as most of us apply and abuse the concept in real life, simply did not exist, then across the world the rates of violence, abuse, addiction, murder and suicide would plummet like a stone, because love and the selfish compulsions for which it is often mistaken are, in far too many cases, violent, ugly, destructive, abusive, agonising and cruel. So while I must stress that even the worst films in inverted commas in Ki-Duk's filmography are never gratuitous in any sense of the term, that is to say, never revelling in violence, abuse or suffering in a transparent attempt to titillate, shock or disgust the audience with the intention of provoking outrage, they do unflinchingly show the darker side of humanity, the terrible things that happen every day but which we all choose to ignore. Before you all run screaming for the hills though, the reason why I adore so much of Ki-Duk's work is that it also reveals and explores the beauty and transcendent spirituality of love which still exists in the midst of this dark, ugly and brutal reality. As a matter of fact, many of his films ask the fundamental questions of A, what is reality to begin with, and B, is that reality always more important than what we believe, perceive and desire, often masterfully blending reality with dreams, hallucinations or spiritual concepts and beliefs, as I mentioned earlier, looking beyond the brutally mundane to explore the transcendent beauty which often still exists in spite of, or perhaps even because of it. But speaking only for myself though, while I am personally able to perceive and embrace all of this through looking beyond the sexual and emotional abuse, manipulation and exploitation, self-harm, necrophilia, cannibalism, animal abuse, murder, rape and suicide, I understand that many people are not. So when all is said and done, if you are new to Ki-Duk's work, then I highly recommend learning as much as you possibly can about any given film which he has written and or directed before watching it yourself, and I'm always available if you have any specific or general questions about his work. Before I move on to the official top 10 list for lack of a better term, however, I feel compelled to give an honourable mention to The Bow, a beautifully transcendent movie which explores the often heavily blurred distinction between genuine love and the need to possess and to control. The story of a teenage girl who was found when she was only 6 years old and has been raised alone on a boat far out at sea by an old man who plans to marry her as soon as she comes of age. If we imagine that love is a spectrum ranging from the purest, most selfless and most spiritual emotional connection to the darkest, most destructive and most deeply disturbing and malevolent obsession, envy and suffering, then like Kim Ki-Duk's earlier films Spring, Summer, Autumn, Winter and Spring, The Bow is definitely on what I hesitate to call the lighter end of the spectrum, but while it lacks the brutal reality and exploration of the darkest aspects of the human condition which define so much of his work, this movie is definitely not a cop-out, Kim Ki-Duk light, or any other similar term that you may wish to use. Instead, bearing in mind that in one way or another, almost all of his movies are an exploration of love, this film merely explores a less painful aspect of that emotional connection between two souls, still using silence and his signature visual style, which makes so much of his work utterly unique, to focus our attention on the unspoken bond between the two protagonists, with neither of them ever needing to speak a single word that we are able to hear, because such connections and emotions go beyond mere language and render it entirely obsolete. So indeed, the main reason why I'm listing this film here as an honourable mention before moving on to the top 10 is that if you've never seen a Kim Ki-Duk movie before and are thinking something along the lines of, well, his work sounds really intriguing, but I don't know if I could handle the explicit brutality and suffering, then I would highly recommend this movie as an introduction to his films. Because if, to put it bluntly, while you are watching this movie, you are unable to look beyond your knee-jerk emotional reactions and moral outrage, as well as the moral absolutes and assumptions of most of society, and therefore see nothing but a dirty old man manipulating, grooming and exploiting a teenage girl, then there is literally no point in watching any of his other work, since the chances are good that you will never see anything other than misogynistic exploitation porn. Not using the term porn literally, I hasten to add, before anyone leaps to the conclusion that Kim Ki-Duk's work contains any kind of gratuitously explicit sexual content, but rather using it in the same way that many of his critics, including myself, describe many of Quentin Tarantino's films as being vengeance porn. But regardless of whether or not this is your introduction to the work of this director though, the moments to look out for in this film beyond the surreal and dreamlike ending are first of all the scene in which two men from the mainland attempt to rape the girl, and far from being submissive or dependent upon the old man for protection, she fights back alone, outwitting and gravely wounding them both with an obvious air of pride and satisfaction which almost borders on outright sadism, demonstrating that even if she is a victim of emotional manipulation and grooming at the hands of the old man, she is by no means a damsel in distress who needs to be rescued in the most patronising sense of the term. And secondly, and in fact far more importantly, when the old man tells fortunes by shooting arrows into the side of the boat, while the teenage girl swings in front of the target. This is a genuine act of trust, with the girl never expressing the slightest hint of fear or hesitation as the arrows literally whiz past her face. But is it evidence of a profound emotional bond between them, or merely proof that she has been manipulated and is too naive to understand? In conclusion then, as I've now indicated repeatedly, The Bow is a beautifully transcendent masterpiece, but although it caused me to question my own assumptions and those of society in general regarding the difference between love and exploitation, the fact that it failed to have any long-lasting emotional impact upon me personally means that I can only list it here as an honourable mention rather than as part of the official, for lack of a better term, top 10. And having now taken this long to merely give the introduction and review that honourable mention, instead of killing myself recording and editing a 45-minute to 1 hour long epic, which very few people will have the time or the inclination to ever watch, I've now realised that the best course of action will be to devote a separate video to each movie in this top 10 and then organise them all into a playlist, thus ensuring that everyone who wants to watch the full top 10 can do so, while others are free to only listen to my opinion of the films in which they are interested. In other words, everybody wins. So please join me next time for my review, opinion, analysis, or what have you of number 10, The Coast Guard, and until then, annyeong.